70th birthday dinner party at the Savoy in December 1969, Lord Mountbatten famously said, "There are probably greater painters in the world than Noel, greater novelists, greater librettists, composers of music, singers, dancers, comedians, tragedians, stage producers, film directors, cabaret artists, TV stars. If there are, they are 14 different people. Only one man combined all 14 different labels, the master." Well, same could be said of one of Noel's greatest friends, Clemence Dane, aka Winifred Ashton, or Winnie, as she was known only to the master. Clemence Dane, CBE, is the invisible woman of British 20th century culture. Between the First and Second World Wars, she was Britain's most influential, versatile and successful female writer, and arguably the most complete and versatile female creative force. And just for good measure, she was the first British woman screenwriter to win the Oscar. But as well as being accomplished protein artists, there are some other uncanny similarities between Coward and Clemence Dane. They both emerged from lower middle class families, in her case suburban southeast, and in his case suburban southwest areas of outer London, in what Noel deemed genteel poverty. They were both children of the late Victorian era, or Noel just about under one. Their fathers were both called Arthur. Their fathers were both salesmen. Arthur Coward, a piano salesman, and Arthur Ashton, a commercial seed merchant who worked in the City of London. They both showed prodigious artistic talent as children, Noel for acting and Winifred for drawing and painting. Their families had both suffered tragic losses, the death of Noel's brother Russell, aged 6, and the loss of Winifred's mother when she was just 2. They both achieved huge success in the UK and America in theatre and film. He earned more money though. Once successful, they both financially supported elderly relatives and friends. And they both had a deep and abiding love for England, its history and its people. And though quintessentially English, they both had international appeal. In fact, it has occurred to me that if you wanted to strike a medal or a coin depicting Mr. and Mrs. Britannia, their profiles would not have been out of place on it. They first met on Thursday the 29th of May 1928 after Clemence and her then secretary and companion Elsie Arnold went to see a performance of his review This Year of Grace at the London Pavilion. Clicky. By then, both had announced themselves as multi-talented and provocative artists. Clemence with her first novel, Regiment of Women, and the stage play A Bill of Divorcement, which was subsequently filmed 3 times, and Noel, of course, with The Vortex and Hayfeeder. From then, she became one of 4 women at the heart of what Coward and his companions called the family. As Barry Day wrote in Star Quality, with the exception of Violet, his mother, they were more to him than his relations. Lorna Lorraine, Joycey Carey, Blackie, Gladdy Calthrop, Winnie, and of course his 2 musketeers, Coley and little lad Graham Payne. That's Clemence teaching Gladys Calthrop how to sculpt. Barry also said wherever he went, they went with him, often in person, always in spirit, and indeed they did. And when not together, they corresponded profusely by letter, telegram, and to their mutual delight in verse. As Graham Payne explained, the family was our support system. We got together and stayed together because we wanted to be together. In other words, they formed an early 20th century version of the logical family exemplified in Armistead Maupin's Tales of the City novels. Noel Coward described his new friend Winnie as a wonderful, unique mixture of artist, writer, games mistress, poet and egomaniac. And so would I, frankly. He wrote that he never published a book or produced a play since I've known her without first indulging myself in the warming radiance of her enthusiasm and the kindly but nonetheless perceptive shrewdness of her criticism. Now this shrewdness and criticism was called on from almost the start of their friendship when in 1930 he wrote the World War I play Post Mortem, inspired by his appearance in and admiration for Journey's End. He sent Clemence the manuscript and she read it 3 times before sending him a lengthy and considered critique which began, "It is an astonishing piece of work. I think it's incomparably the finest thing you've done. Now, as many of you will know, despite this, although the play was published in 1931, it was not staged until 1944 in a POW camp in Austria. As well as trusting her professional judgment, Noel also knew that Winnie could be entrusted with his occasional admissions of weakness and weariness, as he expressed in his poem to her. "For tiredness is in my bones, my spirit with exhausting groans. I wait depressed and uninspired, because I'm tired, tired, tired. Tired of films and tired of plays, tired of nights and tired of days, tired of laughter, tired of tears, tired of all these dreadful years." Noel and many of their mutual friends and colleagues were frequent visitors to Clemence Covent Garden Home, 20 Tavistock Street, especially during the Second World War. He recalled, "From 1930 onwards, whenever I have returned from abroad, or even from the wilds of Manchester, I've always winged my way like a homing pigeon to that cosy, friendly, long-suffering room on the first floor overlooking the market." As Richard Huggett, biographer of Binkie Beaumont, said, "Clemence gave London in the 30s and 40s its only real artistic salon. It was so much more fun than the Bloomsbury set." Winifred's circle laughed at everybody and everything and actually got things done. Plays were written, novels completed, poems published, paintings finished and production deals finished. Winifred's friends were real artists. They didn't just talk about doing it, they did it. Now sometimes the friends would set each other little professional dares. One such was Noel daring Clemence to write a play that was not based on historical episodes or figures, but instead one in which somebody had to say, "Would you kindly pass me the pickles?" And so, in autumn of 1939, Clemence wrote Cousin Muriel, a drawing room about the misadventures of a female kleptomaniac, as you do. Produced in March 1940, it starred Edith Evans, as said, kleptomaniac, Alec Guinness and Peggy Ashcroft, to whom fell the task of uttering the immortal line as suggested by Noel. And the play script's dedication read, "For Noel, to whom the author has much pleasure in passing the pickles." Noel told her the play was absolutely first-rate, most finely written and constructed. "But I think, if I may make so bold, it is far less past the pickles than you imagine. I am most awfully excited about it. If this is your pickles mood, for God's sake, stick to it." Now, another mutual close friend, David Niven, correctly observed, Winifred was not a Hollywood type. Noel himself once declared, "I'm not very keen on Hollywood, I'd rather have a nice cup of cocoa, really." And Clemence's attitude to the place was not entirely dissimilar. However, in October 1932, she accepted a 6-month contract from David O. Selznick, then at RKO Studios, to live and work on several screen projects. Between 1933 and 1948, apart from war years, she had regular work stints in Hollywood, and she regarded her experiences there, as she did most things in life, and as an adventure and an artistic experiment. During her first stint in 1933, Diana Wynyard was also in town to attend the premiere of Cavalcade, the film adaptation of Noel's successful play in which she had starred. It opened in America on the 15th of April 1933 and went on to win 3 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. Now, Wynyard herself was nominated for Best Actress, but would lose out to Katharine Hepburn for Morning Glory, of whom Clemence said, "She has only 3 sets of expressions, is shockingly bad in comedy, and cannot be active. And I still maintain on hearing her again that she is the very ugliest voice and accent I've ever heard." World War II interrupted Clemence's adventures in Hollywood, but not her productivity, nor that of Noel, although neither of them could have foreseen what huge successes they would enjoy during those uncertain times. On September the 3rd, 1939, she wrote, "On Monday night, all of us came in for a sort of farewell party. Noel sat on the sofa, singing old songs of the 90s, with Dick Adamsall playing for him." Now, that piano Adamsall was playing was familiar to Noel because it had once belonged to him, but it took the place of a larger grand piano that Clemence had had, and they swapped, and she still had the former Coward piano right up until her death. On September the 3rd, the day Britain declared war on Germany, she joined Noel for cocktails and dinner at the Ritz, and they had a little disagreement, as she noted. I unfortunately said a word in defence of the Germans, saying something of the miseries I had seen in Germany as a result of the Versailles Treaty, and he set Noel off on one of his violences. To hear him describe his own sensations and plans of vengeance against the Germans, you would think he was Caligula. Of course, a few years later, Coward might well have been planning some vengeance because, as you know, the Luftwaffe bombed his London home in Gerald Row. But this, of course, had one significant benefit. While it was being repaired, he took himself and Joyce Carey off to Port Merion for holiday and wrote Blithe Spirit in 6 days. It's generally believed that the role of eccentric medium Madame Arcati was created for and inspired by Clemence, and the likes of Judy Campbell and Graham Payne had gone on the record as saying this was indeed the case. And as Graham Payne said, she could have played it to perfection for precisely the same reason that Margaret Rutherford eventually did. Neither of them realised that what they did was funny. And for those of us more familiar with the quirkiness of Clemence Dane's character, the other similarities between her and Arcati are screamingly obvious. The eccentric manner of dress, the unwavering self-assuredness, the indomitable sense that she was always right. That's good to me. And as alluded to by Payne, her genuine obliviousness to her own comedic value. But there are also more obvious spiritual connections. For more than 30 years, she believed her flat in Covent Garden has a resident ghost, and she would often ask friends to go up the stairs before her. Now, speaking as someone who grew up in a haunted house and who went to a school that had a haunted bell tower, I'm inclined to believe it. On top of that, one of her cousins, Edmund Teddy Bentley, was an internationally famous spiritualist, and her 1947 play, Call Home the Heart, combined the themes of love during wartime and clairvoyance. Noel thought that play was completely scatty, with all values both psychologically and theatrically wrong, but it still ran at the St James Theatre for several months. Clemence's initial opinion about Blythe's spirit wasn't too different as expressed in this unpublished poem she sent to Noel. Imagine that her wit's dispersal when she attends the dress rehearsal of Noel's latest burst of laughter to find it deals with the hereafter. That he, by methods rather coarse, manipulates odyllic force, and that, for this has hurt her most, his heroine is just a ghost. Oh Noel, think what you would say if it had been Paul Winnie's play. Of course, history shows how wrong she was. Blythe's Spirit went on to create a new West End record for a non-musical play with a run of 1,997 performances. Now, I discovered evidence that not only did Noel want her to play Arcati in more than one of its stage productions, he had also suggested that she take the role when it was made into a film. Now, this was no fanciful whim on his part, as he knew of her early stage career. In 1910, she had studied at the School of Musical and Dramatic Art, founded by Cairns James, star of the Doyley Cart Opera Company, and in 1912 she became the actress Diana Cortis, taking the name from one of her ancestors. And she appeared in a number of plays, working with the likes of Eva Moore, Harley Granville Barker, and Marguerite Schiaffo, who, by an amazing coincidence, or not, later became the French literary agent of both Clemence Dane and Noel Coward. Now, during Christmas 1944, Noel asked Clemence to take over the role of Arcati as another cast change was coming during its long West End run. And on December the 28th, she wrote to him, "I was dazzled by your suggestion on Boxing Day and went home on air with excitement. But when I began to think it over, I soon realised that it was a sort of pipe dream that one must not allow to spread over into daytime." And she continued, "Apart from that, I still feel, as I told you when you gave me the chance of trying it for films, that if I have got a modest talent, and if I am able sometime to exploit it, that is fine. But that is quite a different thing to standing up for the performances of 3 of the best actresses in London with an equally brilliant film performance coming." Now, the event which probably prompted Noel's offer was that she had returned briefly to the stage in 1942. She was playing the chorus in Jacob's Ladder, directed by Tyrone Guthrie, taking over from her friend Sybil Thorndike for a regional tour which the actress couldn't complete. However, as Clemence later wrote, Diana Cortis had had a photographic memory, learning scripts on sight. Clemence Dane had no such facility, and she laboured long and hard over her lines. Many years later, she did have a notion to base a character on Noel herself. She began work on a new stage play inspired by him and the marital problems of Olivier and Vivian Leigh. The central man character was to be a Noel type, impeccable in public, big public figure, surrounded by a group of friends who outwardly adore him but actually are wildly critical. Perhaps it's just as well that it was never completed. As they'd spent the first day of the war together, it was fitting that Noel spent the evening of VE Day at Clemence's flat. As he noted, we had cold food and drinks and listened to the King's broadcast. Various people came and went. In the later evening, some of us went into the streets again and wandered down the mall to Buckingham Palace. The people sang and cheered, and presently the King and Queen came out on the balcony, and we cheered still more. But, as many people found after the war, something had shifted in their relationship. And in December 46, Noel observed, "The warm magic we knew in the war has gone. It is her fault. She has made a change without reason, but with female prejudice. It is a pity." This change had begun earlier that year when Noel asked Clemence's great friend Richard Adamsall to contribute music for some songs to be included in the review Sigh No More. Unfortunately, most of what he wrote ended up being cut, and Noel predicted that Winnie will never forgive me for taking Dick's material out. And he appeared to be right, because that December his show Pacific 1860 opened at Drury Lane, and he noted, "Winnie never said one word of praise to me, and there was in her attitude a deep and genuine hostility. Everyone else was charming. Winnie has changed so much. It is very sad." Actually, as it turned out, most of the critics didn't like it either. Later, he was able to note that Gladys Calthrop had a long heart-to-heart with Winnie last night, with Winnie in floods, so tonight I rang her up, because I've been fond of her for a long time, and hate feuds. She was very touched, and then proceeded to spew, lovingly, all her grievances against me. She told him that for the last 3 years, I have been becoming so unbearably arrogant that it's grotesque, that everyone is laughing at me, that I'm surrounded by yes men. I said genuinely enough that I would try and figure in future not to be so arrogant. Now, it is curious that I'm not cross or upset. I believe she truly meant what she said, and that it has been boiling up in her for ages. I also believe that most of what she said was balls. But he noted in his diary, "We spent 3 hours, and after much trial and error, got back to the relationship we used to know. I am glad. I would have hated to lose a friend I valued." There have been other spats as well, involving what Clemence regarded as disloyalty to friends. In 1941, tired of what he called 2 very unpleasant attacks on me and my work by Mr. Graham Greene in The Spectator, Noel penned The Ballad of Graham Greene, which included the lines, "Oh, one asks oneself on one's God, my lads, was ever a mind so mean, that could have vented, so shrilly vented, such quantities of spleen?" Clemence was not amused, and she wrote to Noel, "That beastly jingle made me quite sick with anger. Would you ever allow me to write like that of anyone you cared for? Well then, I don't allow it either. So now, please, dear Noel, drop it, dear good dog." One ongoing underlying tension was that, unlike Clemence, Noel avoided aligning himself with any political causes and kind of frowned on those who did. In January 1944, he went on a 3-month concert tour of South Africa, and he said, "Aware that my strong contempt for any sort of racial discrimination might, if expressed however casually, imperil the success of my tour, I decided to sidetrack the subject whenever possible, and when not possible, to keep my mouth firmly shut." Now, in contrast, in June 1963, Clemence added her name to a list of 48 playwrights who signed a public declaration that they would refuse to allow their works to be performed in any South African theatre, or in fact any theatre anyway, that operated a colour bulb. And the list of writers for this included Arthur Miller, John Osborne, Muriel Spark, Harold Pinter, and Robert Bolt, but not Noel Coward. But one social cause that both Noel and Clemence were dedicated to and devoted time and energy and talents to was supporting the Actors' Orphanage Home, which is now the Actors' Children's Trust. including the annual star-studied garden parties and various special stage and screen things. Noel became its president in October 34, and gradually the executive committee included a lot of the Coward people, Joyce and Lorne and Diana Wynyard and Clemence Dane, who joined in 1937. And one of her ideas for a garden party was to have a fortune-telling tent. Now, okay. In December 1956, Clemence and Gladys Calthrop came to stay at Blue Harbour for 3 weeks. It was her first and only holiday in the tropics. During her stay, Clemence insisted that she should teach them all the joys of clay modelling, something she had encouraged other friends like Anna's Marius Goring to embrace. Of course, some of her best-known works of art were of Noel. This is actually a visit in November 1953. He's at the piano. He was writing the songs for After the Ball, which was his adaptation of Lady Windermere's Fan, and while he wrote 2 songs, she did the painting. There's also this, which is Joyce Carey, Anne Fleming, Noel and Ian Fleming playing canasta. And then, of course, there's this famous painting, which is in the National Portrait Gallery. And then her bust, which he said Noel didn't take my bust and hang it in the National Gallery, and he did indeed bequeath it to her. By early 1965, Clemence had terminal bowel cancer on top of her various other painful conditions. But from her sickbed, she wrote Noel one final poem as an extract. Don't mock, you'll receive quite a shock from the crone, for since you last saw her, she's less by 4 stone. She's fatter than Falstaff, rotunda than Prinny, but now she can sign, yours with love, Skinny Winnie. On March 1965, Noel was in Jamaica when he wrote what it turned out to be his last letter to her about his upcoming appearance in Bunny Lake is Missing, appearing as a queer, drunk, elderly masochist. No, Winifred, it is not typecasting. It arrived too late. She died at home on March the 28th. He received 2 cables telling him what had happened. And he wrote to Olwyn, her companion, as she was a woman of such tremendous courage and gallantry, she didn't want us to grieve too much, although I must admit I'm having a bad time at this very minute. I'll have to end now, but I will end, I think, appropriately with the wonderful poem that serves as a tribute not only to Noel's friendships, but to their friendship. When I have fears, as Keats had fears, of the moment